Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku was a stand user in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure? Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The universe, Izuku Midoriya had long since concluded, was a grand and cosmic lottery. Some people were born with silver spoons, others with loving families, and a precious, infinitesimally small few were born with a soul that could fight. A stand. A manifestation of their life energy, their fighting spirit, forged into a shimmering, ethereal guardian visible only to its fellow spiritual kin. In a world where these powers existed, the ultimate prize in that cosmic lottery was to be born a stand user. To have a partner forged from the very essence of your being, a power to shape the world around you. And then, there was him, Izuku Midoriya, a boy who had lost the lottery before he was even old enough to understand the stakes. He sat hunched over his desk at Aldera Junior High, the drone of the history teacher's voice a meaningless buzz in his ears. His pen, a cheap plastic thing, scratched furiously across the pages of a notebook labeled, in meticulously neat handwriting, Hero Analysis for the Future, Volume 13. The current entry was a detailed breakdown of the pro-hero Kamui Woods and his stand, in the Hall of the Mountain King. Stand name, in the Hall of the Mountain King. User, Kamui Woods. Type, colony/long-range stand. Ability, manifests as a swarm of microscopic, seed-like entities that can rapidly grow and intertwine into complex wooden structures. Extremely versatile for capture and restraint, as seen in the lacquer chain prison technique. Weakness? Appears to be vulnerable to wide area, high-intensity heat or fire, susceptible to stands that can attack on a massive scale. Case in point, Mount Lady's debut. He drew a small, detailed sketch of the hero, then another of his stand's tendrils wrapping around a villain. It was more than a hobby, it was a lifeline. If he couldn't have a stand himself, he would learn everything there was to know about them. He would understand their powers, their weaknesses, their potential, better than anyone. It was the only way he could feel even remotely connected to the world of heroes he so desperately worshipped. And as third-year students, it's time to start thinking seriously about your futures. The teacher's voice finally cut through his concentration. I would hand out these career aptitude tests, but the teacher snatched the papers from his desk and tossed them into the air with a theatrical flair. Why bother? I know you all want to go into the hero track. The classroom erupted. Students showed off, their nascent, weak stands flickering into existence around them. One boy elongated his fingers, a simple transformation-type stand. Another girl levitated her pencil, a telekinetic ability so minor it could barely be called a stand. They were like sparks in the dark, faint but present. They were all winners of the lottery, even if their prize was small. Yes, you all have some wonderful stands. The teacher placated, a nervous edge to his smile. He knew, as all teachers did, that a classroom of teenage stand users was a powder keg. But using your stands in public is against the law, you know that. Hey, teach! A gratingly familiar voice drawled from the back. Don't lump me in with this bunch of losers. Katsuki Bakugo leaned back in his chair, feet kicked up on his desk, an arrogant smirk plastered on his face. There was no flickering light around him. Bakugo's power was a constant, simmering presence, a palpable aura of heat and aggression that everyone in the room could feel, stand user or not. I'm the real deal, he sneered. These extras will be lucky to end up as sidekicks to some D-lister. Me? I'm aiming for the top. I'm gonna ace the UA entrance exam and become the #1 hero. I'll be richer and more famous than All-Star himself. The class fell silent, a mixture of awe and fear directed at the ash-blonde boy. UA High. The top hero school in Japan, a fortress of learning that had produced the greatest stand users in history. It was a near impossible dream for most. The teacher shuffled through his papers, his eyes widening slightly. Oh, that's right. Midoriya, you wanted to go to UA too, didn't you? The air in the room froze. Every head turned to look at Izuku. The silence was heavy, suffocating, broken a second later by a tidal wave of derisive laughter. Midoriya? No way, you can't get into the hero course just by studying. He doesn't even have a stand. They'd never let him in. Izuku shrank in his seat, his face burning hot with shame. They got rid of that rule. I could be the first one. he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. It was true. The stand requirement had been amended to a demonstrable power or skill clause years ago, but it was a technicality. No one without a stand had ever passed the brutally physical entrance exam. It was a fool's hope, and he knew it. They all knew it. An explosion ripped through the silence. Izuku yelped and flew backwards as his desk erupted in a cloud of smoke and splinters. Bakugo stood over him, a hand planted on the now charred wood, palm sizzling with miniature detonations. The smell of burnt sugar and nitroglycerin filled the air. DKU! Bakugo roared, his voice cracking with rage. His crimson eyes were filled with a terrifying mix of fury and, was that pity? You're worse than these rejects. You're standless. You think you can stand in the same ring as me? You think Yue is some charity for worthless dreamers? Izuku scrambled back, pressing himself against the wall. And no, Kaken! That's not it. I wasn't trying to compete with you, I swear. It's been my dream since I was a kid, and you never know unless you try. Unless you try? Bakugo's sneer deepened. He snatched the notebook from the floor where it had fallen. What's this? Hero analysis for the future? Still playing make-believe, Deku? Give it back! Izuku cried, reaching for it. It was his treasure. His everything. Bakugo's stand flared to life. It was a perfect, humanoid manifestation, built like a fighter, with metallic gauntlets shaped like grenades. Its name was TNT. With a flick of its wrist, it touched the cover of the notebook. There was no immediate effect, just a faint orange glow that seeped into the paper. You know, Deku, Bakugo said, a cruel glint in his eye. Most heroes have stories about their school days. I want the story of my origin to be perfect, and that means it starts with me, the only kid from this garbage junior high to make it into UA. He casually tossed the notebook out the open window. Izuku watched in horror as his life's work tumbled through the air. Oh, and one more thing, Bakugo added, his voice dropping to a low, venomous whisper as he leaned in close. Don't even think about applying to UA, got it? He turned and stalked away, his cronies trailing behind him, snickering. The bell rang, signaling the end of the day. The other students filed out, casting pitying glances at Izuku, who remained frozen on the floor. He could still feel the phantom heat of Bakugo's stand, a power so confident, so real. TNT's ability was terrifyingly simple and brutally effective. It could imbue any object its fists touched with a latent explosive property. Bakugo could then detonate that object at will, with the intensity of the explosion controlled by how much of his own catalyzed sweat was on his palms. He didn't just create explosions, he turned the world itself into his personal ammunition. It was a top-tier stand, destined for greatness. Izuku finally moved, his limbs stiff. He walked to the window and looked down. His notebook was floating in the school's koi pond, its pages bleeding ink into the water. As he watched, a small, delayed thump sound echoed up. A burst of fire and smoke erupted from the notebook, sending the terrified koi scattering. The cover, where TNT had touched it, was now a blackened, smoldering ruin. Bakugo hadn't just thrown it away. He had made a point. Izuku retrieved the soggy, scorched notebook with a heavy heart. He squeezed the water out, the pages pulpy and ruined. Volume 13, gone. He slumped onto a nearby bench, the setting sun casting long, lonely shadows across the empty schoolyard. He pulled out his phone, his thumb instinctively navigating to a bookmarked video. The title was simple, All Stars Debut. The video was old, grainy, and shaky, shot on a phone from over a decade ago. A massive villain, a man whose stand allowed him to inflate his body to the size of a building, was rampaging through downtown. Debris rained down. People screamed. Then, a figure landed in the middle of the chaos, laughing. It was him. All-Star. He looked impossibly huge, a mountain of muscle with a smile that could calm a hurricane. His stand was a blur, a being of pure emerald light, and overwhelming power that moved in perfect sync with him. It's fine now! All-Star's voice boomed from the phone's tiny speaker. Why? Because I am here, a villain laughed. You and what stand, little man? All-Star's smile never wavered. Just this one. Heroes! He threw a single punch. The stand mimicked the motion, and the resulting shockwave was biblical. It didn't just hit the villain, it changed the weather. Dark clouds overhead were blasted apart, and rain suddenly began to fall. The villain was sent flying, unconscious before he even hit the ground. The crowd was silent for a beat, and then erupted into deafening cheers. Izuku had watched this video 1,000 times. He watched it now, tears welling in his eyes mixing with the pond water dripping from his ruined notebook. That power. That charisma. That absolute certainty. All-Star was everything he wanted to be. A memory, sharp and painful, surfaced. A doctor's office, cold and sterile. He was 4 years old, sitting on his mom's lap. The doctor swiveled in his chair, a diagram of a human silhouette glowing on a screen behind him. The silhouette was dark, inert. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Midoriya. Izuku's tests all came back negative. He shows no discernible spiritual energy, no psionic potential, no dormant stand factor. In our world there are 2 types of people. Those whose souls can manifest, and those whose can't. Your son, he's one of the latter. He will never develop a stand." The ride home was silent. Later that night, Izuku had pulled up the same video of All-Star's debut. His mother found him in his dark computer room, his small body trembling in his chair. "Mom," he had whispered, pointing a shaky finger at the screen. Can I be a hero too?" Inko Midoriya had rushed to him, wrapping him in a hug, her own tears flowing freely. "I'm sorry, Izuku," she sobbed, her words muffled in his hair. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." That wasn't what he needed to hear. He needed her to say, yes. He needed one person in the world to believe it was possible. But how could she? How could anyone? He clutched the damp notebook to his chest, the memory fading. It's not fair. The thought was a bitter poison he'd been swallowing his whole life. Why Bakugo, who used his incredible power to torment and belittle? Why not him, who would give anything, to save people with a smile? He took a deep breath, stood up, and started the long walk home. He decided to take a shortcut, under a gloomy, graffiti-covered overpass. It was a subconscious choice, a desire to be somewhere dark and forgotten that matched his mood. He was so lost in his thoughts that he didn't hear the gurgling sound until it was too late. A wet, scraping noise echoed from a sewer grate behind him. He turned, his eyes widening in terror. A monstrous mass of green, viscous sludge was pouring out of the manhole, forming a towering, grotesque shape. 2 manic, yellow eyes and a wide, slasher-like mouth floated within the semi-transparent ooze. It was a stand, but a twisted, malformed one. A pneuma. An artificial stand user. A medium-sized vessel. The creature rasped, its voice like mud bubbling. Perfect. I need a place to hide. Before Izuku could even scream, the sludge villain lunged. It was on him in an instant, a cold, suffocating wave of filth. He thrashed, but it was like fighting water. The sludge forced its way into his mouth, his nose, filling his lungs. It was thick and tasted of sewage and decay. Can't breathe. His vision started to tunnel. Black spots danced at the edges. He clawed at the sludge, his fingers finding no purchase. His legs kicked feebly. This was it. He was going to die here, suffocating in filth in a dark underpass, his last moments filled with the bitter irony of being killed by a villain when all he ever wanted was to be a hero. My notebook. His hand, losing its strength, dropped the scorched volume. No. Somebody, help. His consciousness was fading, the world turning into a muted, blurry dream. He was so tired. A hero. And then a sound. A loud, metallic clang. The sewer grate that the villain had emerged from was sent flying, hitting the far wall of the underpass with incredible force. A booming voice, a voice from his dreams and his phone screen, echoed through the tunnel. Have no fear, citizen! Izuku's eyes, barely open, saw a silhouette against the bright sunlight. It was impossibly large, a titan in a red, white, and blue costume. Why? Because I am here, All-Star. The sludge villain recoiled, turning its manic eyes toward the new arrival. You! How did you? You thought you could lose me, did you? All-Star's grin was blinding. He crouched, his muscles coiling like immense springs. His stand, The magnificent, emerald green, heroes shimmered into existence behind him, crackling with righteous power. It was even more awe-inspiring in person, a god of pure energy. Not a chance, All-Star cocked his fist back. The stand mimicked him perfectly. Emerald. Smash! He didn't even punch the villain directly. He punched the air in its direction. The resulting shockwave was a physical thing, a solid wall of wind that ripped through the underpass. The pressure was so immense that the sludge villain was instantly atomized, blown apart into a million tiny, harmless droplets that splattered against the walls and ceiling. The sludge was blasted out of Izuku's lungs. He collapsed to the ground, coughing and gasping, taking in huge, life-giving gulps of air. The world swam back into focus. All-Star was standing over him, carefully bottling the villain's core consciousness, a single, terrified eyeball, into a large soda bottle. He corked it and tucked it into a pouch on his belt. "Excellent work holding on, my boy," All-Star said, giving Izuku a thumbs up. His smile seemed to light up the entire gloomy tunnel. "I apologize for getting you caught up in my fight. I was chasing this one all morning." "But it's all over now," Izuku stared, dumbfounded. All-Star. The symbol of peace. His idol. Right here. In front of him. He had saved his life. And an autograph! Izuku fumbled for his notebook, his mind a whirlwind of pure, unadulterated fanboyism. "Where's my notebook? Can you please sign my—" He opened the soggy book. On a page that had somehow survived the water and fire, a huge, sprawling signature was already there, signed with a confident flourish. "All-Star. He already signed it!" Izuku screeched, bowing rapidly. "Thank you so much! This will be a family heirloom. A treasure to be passed down for generations. Ha! Of course!" All-Star boomed, patting the bottle. "Well, I must be off. Have to get this fellow to the authorities. Stay safe, young man." He crouched, preparing to leap. "Wait!" Izuku's mind screamed. "There's so much I have to ask him." The question. The one question that had haunted him his entire life. The one that his mother couldn't answer, that the doctor had answered with cold, clinical finality. He had to ask. He had to hear it from him. Without thinking, driven by a desperation that overrode all common sense, Izuku lunged forward just as All-Star launched himself into the air. He grabbed onto the hero's leg, clinging on for dear life. "Whoa! Hey, kid! Let go! Your fanaticism is a bit much!" All-Star shouted, wind whipping past them as they soared over the city. "If I let go, I'll die!" Izuku shrieked, his face contorting in the wind. "Oh! Good point!" All-Star grumbled, looking for a place to land. He quickly touched down on the roof of a nearby department store, his landing soft as a feather. He gently pried Izuku's fingers from his leg. "Sheesh! A little overzealous, don't you think?" All-Star said, dusting himself off. "Bang on the door for a while. Someone will let you down. Now I really must be going." He turned to leave. "Wait!" Izuku yelled. "Please! Just one question!" All-Star stopped, sighed, and turned back. "Kid, I'm out of time. I really—" He froze. A strange hissing sound filled the air. Steam began to pour off of All-Star's body, obscuring him in a thick white cloud. Izuku watched, confused, as the hero's massive form seemed to deflate. The mountain of muscle shrank, the heroic jawline receded, and the booming presence vanished. When the steam cleared, the man standing before Izuku was a scarecrow. He was skeletally thin, with gaunt, hollowed-out cheeks, shadowed eyes, and spiky, deflated blonde hair. He looked fragile, like a strong wind could knock him over. A trickle of blood ran from the corner of his mouth as he coughed, a wet, rattling sound. Izuku's jaw dropped. He stared, completely and utterly speechless. This couldn't be. Who? Where's All-Star? Are you an imposter? A villain with a transformation stand? Izuku stammered, taking a step back. The skeletal man sighed, wiping the blood from his chin with the back of a bony hand. "I assure you, I am All-Star." To prove it, he flexed, and for a fleeting second, his body bulked up to its heroic form before he deflated again with a pained wheeze. "This is my true form, kid. What you see on TV, that's just me flexing, like a guy at the pool sucking in his gut, but more extreme." He lifted his baggy t-shirt, and Izuku felt his stomach churn. On the man's left side was a horrific injury, a massive, swirling scar, a vortex of ruined flesh and puckered tissue, centered on a deep, dark cavity. It looked like something had tried to scoop out his entire torso from the inside. "Pretty gross, right?" The man, Toshinori Yagi, though Izuku didn't know that name yet, said with a grimace. "Got this in a fight 5 years ago. My stomach was destroyed. I had most of my respiratory system removed. I've had surgery after surgery, but the damage is permanent. Now, I can only be a hero for about 3 hours a day. The rest of the time, I'm this." 5 years ago. Izuku's analytical mind raced. There were no public records of All-Star taking such a grievous injury. It must have been a secret fight. A fight against a truly monstrous foe. 5 years ago, Izuku muttered. Was it against Toxic Chainsaw? His stand poison was devastating. Toshinori shook his head. "You've got a good memory, kid, but no. That thug couldn't have done this. This fight was never made public. I asked for it to be kept that way. I am the symbol of peace. The world needs to believe that their symbol is an unbreakable pillar of hope. The idea of me being brought to the brink of death by a villain, it would breed an anxiety that the world just doesn't need." He coughed again, another speckle of blood appearing on his lips. "There's a villain out there," he continued, his voice low and serious. "A monster who has plagued the shadows for generations. A man who can steal stands and grant them to others. His name is All for One." His own stand, master of puppets, is a nightmare. He's the one who did this to me, All for One. The name sounded like a fairy tale, a bogeyman that pro-heroes whispered about. To hear that he was real, that he had done this to All-Star, it was world-shattering. Izuku's mind was reeling. He was standing on a rooftop with his idol, who was a broken, dying man, sharing secrets that could destabilize society. And all he could think about was his one, selfish question. He had to ask. It was now or never, even with that injury. Izuku began, his voice trembling. He clenched his fists, tears blurring his vision. "You're still saving people. You're still smiling, to show everyone that everything is okay. You're the greatest hero of all time." Toshinori looked at him, his tired eyes showing a flicker of surprise. "So please!" Izuku shouted, bowing his head so low his forehead nearly touched the concrete. "Please, just tell me. Is it possible for someone like me, someone without a stand, to ever become a hero like you?" He squeezed his eyes shut, bracing for the answer. This was it. The moment of truth. The silence that followed was heavier than any physical blow. "A hero without a stand," All-Star said, his voice quiet and devoid of its usual bombast. "Kid," Izuku looked up, a sliver of desperate hope in his heart. All-Star's expression was grim, pained. "No," the word was a clean, sharp blade through Izuku's soul. It severed the last thread of hope he'd been clinging to his entire life. "I'm sorry," All-Star said, his voice laced with genuine sympathy. "But I can't lie to you. Pro-heroes are always risking their lives. We fight villains whose powers can warp reality, stop time, or erase you from existence with a touch. Some of the most intense battles are over in an instant. It's a world of pure, overwhelming spiritual power." He gestured to his own emaciated frame. "Look at me. Even with one of the most powerful stands ever known, I was almost killed. To face those dangers without a stand of your own, it's not just reckless, it's suicide. You'd be a liability." He softened his tone, seeing the utter devastation on Izuku's face. "Listen, kid. It's not wrong to have dreams. But you have to be realistic. Having the heart of a hero isn't enough. If you want to help people, there are other ways. You could become a police officer. They may not get the glory, but they're an important part of the system. Or a doctor. You could save lives that way. You could even go into stand research. A mind like yours that analyzes powers so well? You'd be a huge asset." Every word was kind. Every word was logical. And every word was a nail in the coffin of Izuku Midoriya's dream. He had been told no by the doctor, by his mother's tears, by Bakugo's cruelty. But hearing it from the man he admired most in the world, it was final. I see. Izuku whispered, his body numb. I have to go, All-Star said, turning toward the stairs. Just be safe, kid. And find a more realistic dream. He disappeared down the stairwell, leaving Izuku alone on the rooftop. The wind felt cold. The sounds of the city below, sirens, traffic, people living their lives, felt distant, like they were from another world. A world he could never be a part of. He was just a boy without a stand. A Deku. Useless. And for the first time in his life, Izuku Midoriya started to believe it. The silence on the rooftop was a physical entity. It was a weighted blanket, heavy with the dust of shattered dreams, pressing down on Izuku Midoriya's shoulders. The words echoed in the hollow space where his life's ambition used to be. No, be realistic. Find a more realistic dream. All-Star's voice, the voice that had always been a booming trumpet of hope, had become a quiet, sympathetic whisper of finality. And it hurt more than any explosion Bakugo could ever conjure. It hurt more than suffocating in a villain's sludge. Those were physical pains, temporary and survivable. This was a soul-deep wound, a spiritual amputation. The part of him that dreamed had been surgically, precisely, and kindly removed. He didn't know how long he stood there after Tashinori left. The sun continued its indifferent descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple that felt like a mockery. The city below hummed with life, a vibrant tapestry of people with futures, with purposes, with stands. He felt like a ghost observing a world he was no longer part of. His legs moved on autopilot, carrying him down the stairwell, through the department store where shoppers bustled, their faces alight with mundane concerns. A sale on shirts. What to have for dinner. The latest gossip about a celebrity stand user. Izuku moved through them like a phantom, unseen and unheard. He was nothing. A background character in everyone else's story. He walked. He didn't take the train. He didn't have the energy to navigate the crowds, to feel the press of normal, hopeful people around him. He walked the long way home, his scorched notebook clutched in his hand like a religious text that had been proven false. His own analysis, his own passion, now seemed like the pathetic ramblings of a fool. What was the point of understanding power if you could never possess it? It was like a starving man memorizing recipes from a gourmet cookbook. He replayed the conversation over and over. Tashinori's gaunt face. The horrific scar. The story of a secret war fought in the shadows. He understood, logically, why All-Star had said what he did. It was sensible. It was kind, in its own brutal way. To give him false hope would be cruel. But understanding didn't make the hollow ache in his chest any less real. He remembered his mother's frantic, tearful apology from his childhood. "I'm sorry, Izuku!" At the time, he hadn't understood why she was the one apologizing. Now he did. She was apologizing for the universe's cruel lottery. She was apologizing for the simple fact that he was her son, and she couldn't give him the one thing he wanted more than life itself. He was so lost in his spiraling thoughts that he almost didn't notice the commotion. Flashing lights. The gathering of a crowd. The distant sound of shouts and small, crackling explosions. He was near the Takoba shopping arcade, a place he usually avoided because it was often a hotspot for petty crime. Curiosity, a faint, dying ember of his old self, pulled him forward. He pushed through the periphery of the crowd, his short stature making it difficult to see. "What's going on?" he asked a man in a business suit. "Some sludge villain," the man said, craning his neck. "Popped up out of nowhere. He's got some kid hostage. The heroes are here, but they can't seem to do anything." "Sludge villain?" Izuku's blood ran cold. He squeezed his way further into the crowd until he had a clear view. And then he saw it. It was the same one. The same monster of bubbling green filth that had attacked him in the underpass. It had somehow escaped from the soda bottle. And it was no longer just a formless mass. It had a hostage, a writhing, struggling figure encased in its putrid body. The hostage's spiky, ash-blonde hair was unmistakable. It was Bakugo. Panic seized Izuku with an icy grip. Kaken. He was trapped in there, just like Izuku had been. The villain was using Bakugo's body as a grotesque flesh puppet, and worse, was trying to harness his stand. Bakugo's hands were free, and he was desperately blasting explosions in every direction. TNT was lashing out, but the blasts were uncontrolled, wild. They ripped through the street, setting fire to vendor stalls and forcing the crowd back. But they did nothing to the liquid body of the villain. The sludge simply flowed around the detonations, smothering them, reforming instantly. "Damn it!" A hero with massive, muscular arms shouted. His hero name was Death Arms, and his stand, armed and dangerous, manifested as extra, hyperdense spiritual limbs that gave him incredible strength. He punched the ground in frustration. "I can't get a grip on him. It's like trying to punch water." Nearby, another pro Backdraft was using his water-manipulating stand, hot-blooded, to douse the flames Bakugo's rampaging stand was causing. "I can't attack the villain directly. The kid's right in the middle of it. And if I use too much water, the kid could drown." Even from here, Izuku's analytical mind, a deeply ingrained habit, kicked in despite his despair. He's right. Death Arms' stand is a melee type focused on solid impact. It's useless against a fluid enemy. Backdrafts is a perfect counter to the fires, but a liability against the hostage situation itself. Kamui Woods is here too, but his, in the Hall of the Mountain King, is wood-based. The explosions would turn his restraints into kindling. It's a tactical nightmare. Their stands are all wrong for this specific scenario. He saw Bakugo's face for a moment, twisted in a mask of rage and absolute terror. His eyes were wide with a fear Izuku had never seen in them before. Bakugo, the invincible, the powerful, the one who was always in control, was suffocating. His explosions were growing weaker, less frequent. The sludge was working its way over his mouth and nose. "He's smothering him," Izuku realized with dawning horror. "He's cutting off his oxygen, and the sludge is preventing his sweat from properly catalyzing. He's neutralizing TNT by neutralizing Bakugo himself." The crowd murmured, their faces a mix of morbid curiosity and fear. "Why aren't the heroes doing anything? They're waiting for a hero with the right stand, I guess. That poor kid, he's putting up a good fight though." A good fight. Bakugo was fighting for his life. And no one could help him. All that power, all that arrogance, and in the end, he was just as helpless as Izuku had been. The thought brought him no satisfaction, only a cold, sickening dread. Then, he saw him. Standing in the back of the crowd, hidden in the shadows of an alleyway. The gaunt, skeletal form of Toshinori Yagi. He was clutching his side, his face a mask of self-loathing and powerlessness. He had used up his time. He was just a spectator now, like everyone else. Like Izuku. Their eyes met for a fleeting second across the chaotic scene. Toshinori's gaze was filled with agony and frustration. It was the look of a lion forced to watch a gazelle being taken down, his body too broken to intervene. In that moment, Izuku understood All-Star's pain completely. And then, he looked back at Bakugo. He saw his childhood friend, his tormentor, his rival, the source of so much of his pain, and he saw the tears welling in his terrified eyes. He saw the desperate plea for help that his pride would never allow him to voice. Something inside Izuku snapped. It wasn't a thought. It wasn't a decision. It was a primal, seismic shift in his being. His feet were moving before his brain had given them permission. He burst from the crowd, a small, green-haired blur against the backdrop of fire and chaos. "Kid! Stop! Get back here!" Death Arms yelled, but Izuku couldn't stop. His legs pumped, his lungs burned. All-Star's words echoed in his head. "It's suicide, you'd be a liability. Be realistic." But they were just noise. The only thing that was real was Bakugo's terrified face. "What am I doing?" His mind screamed. "I have no stand. I have no power. I'm going to die." But another deeper part of him, the part that filled 13 notebooks with hero analysis, the part that worshipped a smiling symbol of peace, the part that dreamed of saving people, was in complete control. "Analyze," that voice commanded. "You have no power, so use your head. What can you do? What did you see before?" His eyes darted around, taking in the scene with a speed and clarity born of pure adrenaline. He remembered his own attack. He had been completely helpless until he distracted the villain for a split second. His eyes and his mouth, they seemed to be more solid than the rest of him. If I can just create an opening, an instant is all I need. He swung his bright yellow backpack off his shoulders as he ran. It was heavy, filled with textbooks and his ruined notebook. He cocked his arm back, not like a baseball player, but like a hero he'd once seen on the news, and he threw it with every ounce of strength in his scrawny body. The backpack flew through the air in a perfect arc, spinning end over end, and struck the sludge villain directly in one of its massive yellow eyes. The heavy, sharp corner of a physics textbook inside made the impact sting. "Gragh!" the villain roared, flinching in pain and surprise. For a single, crucial second, its grip on Bakugo loosened. The sludge around Bakugo's mouth receded slightly. He could breathe. "Kaken!" Izuku screamed, closing the distance. He started clawing frantically at the sludge, his fingers digging into the thick, foul-smelling ooze. It was like trying to dig someone out of solid mud. It was useless. Hopeless. "What the hell are you doing here, Deku?" Bakugo choked out, his voice raw. "I don't know," Izuku cried, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the grime. "My legs just started moving. I couldn't just stand there and watch you die." He looked at Bakugo's face, at the fear and confusion warring with the ingrained rage. You looked like you were asking for help." That single, honest statement seemed to break through Bakugo's terror. For a moment, the arrogant bully was gone, replaced by a scared kid who was in way over his head. The villain recovered its senses, its eye turning a furious red. "You again! I'll kill you this time! I'll absorb you both!" The sludge swelled, rising up like a tidal wave, ready to crash down and swallow Izuku whole. This was it. He had bought Bakugo a few seconds of air, and in return, he was going to die. A stupid, pointless death. But maybe it wasn't pointless. From the back of the crowd, Toshinori Yagi watched, his frail body trembling not with weakness, but with a profound, earth-shaking revelation. He had just told this boy to be realistic. He had crushed his dream with the cold, hard logic of a world defined by power. He had told him that the heart of a hero wasn't enough, and he had been wrong. In a street full of onlookers and pro-heroes with powerful stands, the only one who had moved, the only one who had acted, was the powerless, standless boy. The boy who ran into certain death not for glory, not for fame, but because someone looked like they needed help. That wasn't the action of a liability. It wasn't the action of a fool. It was the action of a true hero. A fire ignited in Toshinori's core, a blaze so hot it burned away his fatigue and his physical limits. Damn it all, he thought, a familiar, powerful grin splitting his skeletal face. A hero always finds a way to push past their limits. Steam exploded from his body. The crowd gasped as the pathetic, skeletal man in the alley suddenly swelled, his muscles bulging, his frame expanding, his presence flooding the street with an overwhelming aura of hope and power. In the span of a single second, the scarecrow was gone, and in his place stood the symbol of peace, All-Star. The sludge villain froze, its liquid body seeming to tremble. "I really am pathetic," All-Star said, his voice a low rumble. He walked forward, each step shaking the very asphalt. "Even though I admonished you, I wasn't putting what I said into practice." He looked past the villain, directly at Izuku. "A pro should always be ready to risk their life." He pulled his arm back, his bicep tensing into a corded mass of power. His stand, heroes, materialized behind him, a radiant emerald god, its fist mirroring his own. It crackled with an energy that felt ancient and sacred. "This villain has a hostage and a tricky ability," All-Star declared, his grin widening. "Normally, I'd have to be careful. But for a hero, sometimes you just have to punch harder." Detroit. Smash! The punch he threw was a cataclysm. It was aimed just past the villain, but the sheer force of it displaced all the air in the street. A spiraling vortex of wind pressure erupted from his fist, a controlled hurricane that struck the sludge villain with the force of a meteor. The villain didn't just splatter. It was annihilated. The wind pressure was so immense, and so precisely focused that it peeled the liquid body away from Bakugo, atomizing it and scattering it into the upper atmosphere. At the same time, the updraft changed the weather above the shopping arcade. The clear blue sky suddenly clouded over, and a light rain began to fall. Izuku and Bakugo were thrown back by the wind, but All-Star was already there, catching them both before they hit the ground. He set them down gently. The street was silent for a beat, the only sound the soft patter of the newly formed rain. Then, the crowd erupted into a deafening roar of cheers. All-Star stood tall, one fist raised to the sky, the very picture of indomitable victory. The aftermath was a blur for Izuku. The pro-heroes swarmed the scene. Paramedics checked him and Bakugo over. They were both physically fine, aside from a few scrapes and the lingering stench of the sewer. But the treatment they received couldn't have been more different. Bakugo was praised. "Wow, kid! Your stand is incredible," Death Arms said, clapping him on the shoulder. "So much power! Once you get some control, you'll be a top-tier hero for sure. That kind of firepower is amazing," another hero chimed in. "You were so brave," Bakugo, still shaken but his arrogance quickly returning, soaked it all in, a smug look on his face. Izuku, on the other hand, was scolded. "You, son! What were you thinking?" Death Arms snapped, turning to him. "That was incredibly reckless. There was absolutely no reason for you to put yourself in danger like that. You're lucky you didn't get yourself and the hostage killed." "He's right," Backdraft added, his face stern. "Leaving the heroics to the people who are licensed and equipped to handle it is for your own safety. Your little stunt was suicidal." Every word was a fresh jab at his already wounded spirit. "They're right. I didn't help. I just got in the way. I'm useless." He stood there, head bowed, accepting the criticism, feeling the weight of his powerlessness settle back over him. He watched as reporters swarmed Bakugo, asking for his account of the harrowing ordeal. He watched All-Star give a quick, smiling interview before discreetly slipping away before his time limit ran out. No one looked at him. No one thanked him. To them, he was just a stupid, quirkless kid who almost got in the way of the real heroes. He finally trudged home, the sun now completely gone, leaving the sky a bruised purple. The excitement of the day had faded, leaving behind only the bitter dregs of his failure. He was just about to open the door to his apartment building when a familiar, angry voice called out to him. "DKU!" He turned. Bakugo was standing there, his hands shoved in his pockets, his face contorted into its usual scowl. I never asked you to help me," Bakugo snarled, avoiding his gaze. "And you didn't help. Got it? I had it all under control. I didn't need you. A worthless, standless reject like you, looking down on me? Don't you dare think you can pity me." With that, he spun on his heel and stomped off into the darkness, leaving Izuku standing there, more confused than ever. It was Bakugo's twisted, aggressive way of saying something. Izuku wasn't sure what. Maybe thank you? Maybe just a reassertion of his own fragile dominance. Izuku sighed and turned back toward his path, his mind a wasteland of exhaustion and despair. "I am here!" a voice boomed from the side street. Izuku yelped as All-Star, in his full heroic glory, zipped out and stood before him, striking a dramatic pose. "Hey, All-Star? What are you doing here? Weren't you surrounded by reporters?" Izuku stammered, completely baffled. "Ha! Getting away from them was a piece of cake." All-Star laughed, but then he began to steam again, deflating rapidly until he was once again the skeletal Toshinori Yagi. He coughed, a racking, painful sound, and a bit of blood dotted his chin. "Kid," he said, his voice serious. "I came to thank you. And to apologize. And to discuss your question from earlier." Izuku's heart, which he thought had stopped feeling anything, gave a painful lurch. "If I hadn't heard your story," Toshinori said, looking at him with an intensity that pinned him to the spot. "If I hadn't seen you, a standless, supposedly ordinary boy, run into that chaos, I would have just been another bystander in a fake body, waiting for my time to run out. But you reminded me what it truly means to be a hero." He took a step closer. "All the great heroes, the ones who truly change the world, they have stories about their school days. And most of those stories have one thing in common: their bodies moved before they had a chance to think." Izuku's eyes widened. He could feel tears welling up again, but this time, they weren't tears of sorrow. That's what happened to you, wasn't it? Tashinori asked gently. Izuku could only nod, a choked sob escaping his lips. Yes, Tashinori said, a soft, proud smile on his face. He looked up at the sky, a profound weight seeming to lift from his shoulders. Today, you proved something to me. You proved that having the heart of a hero is not just enough, it is the most important qualification. And you, young man, you have the heart of a true hero. Tashinori looked directly into Izuku's soul, his gaze unwavering. I told you that you couldn't be a hero without a stand, he said, his voice ringing with a newfound conviction. I was wrong. What I should have said is, you cannot become a hero like me without a stand, because my power is special. It is a sacred torch, passed down from one generation to the next, through a line of users who all possess the will to save others. It is a stand that can be inherited. Izuku's mind short-circuited. A stand that can be passed on. It went against everything known about stand biology and spiritual science. Stands were a reflection of the individual. They were born with you, and they died with you. My stand is called Heroes, Tashinori explained, his voice filled with reverence. And I have been searching for a worthy successor, someone with the spirit, the drive, the selfless, reckless need to save others. I was losing hope. And then I found you. He pointed a long, bony finger at Izuku. I deem you worthy of my power. Young man, this is my offer to you. I want you to inherit my stand. The world stopped. The sounds of the city faded away. The only thing that existed was Tashinori's incredible, impossible statement. Inherit his power? All-Star's stand? Him? A standless, worthless Deku? But how? Izuku whispered, his voice hoarse. Stands can't be given away. Unless... His mind flashed to what Tashinori had told him on the rooftop. A man who can steal stands and grant them to others. No, it's nothing like what All for One does, Tashinori clarified quickly. His is a power of theft and coercion. This is a power of transference, of legacy. It can only be willingly passed and willingly received. But the receiving isn't just a simple handover. The vessel must be prepared, both in body and spirit. He gestured to Izuku's scrawny frame. Your spirit is ready. Your body, however, would be blown to pieces if you tried to wield my full power now. He then reached into a small, worn leather pouch at his belt, a pouch Izuku hadn't noticed before. He pulled out an object that seemed to absorb the dim streetlights. It was an arrowhead, ancient and ornate, forged from a strange, meteoric metal that shimmered with an otherworldly light. It was intricately carved, its design both beautiful and menacing. A stand arrow, Izuku breathed, his encyclopedic knowledge bubbling to the surface. They're legendary artifacts said to have been carved from a meteorite that fell to Earth tens of thousands of years ago. It's said they can awaken a stand in those with the potential, or kill those without it. Exactly, Tashinori confirmed, holding the arrow with extreme care. This particular arrow is different. It has been bound to the legacy of heroes. It will not kill you. It will not grant you a new stand. It will act as the key. The catalyst that unlocks the door and allows my power, my soul, my legacy, to flow into you. He held the arrow out. Its tip glinted, impossibly sharp. This will be a long and difficult road, Tashinori warned, his expression deadly serious. You will have to train your body harder than you can possibly imagine. You will face pain, failure, and despair. You will be targeted by the most evil forces this world has ever known. But if you are willing, if you truly want it, he looked at Izuku, whose face was a mess of tears and snot and dawning, brilliant hope. He saw the answer in the boy's shining eyes before he could even speak. All of Izuku's life, he had been told no. No, you're not special. No, you don't have power. No, you can't achieve your dream. He had been given apologies when what he needed was affirmation. Tashinori Yagi, the greatest hero in the world, smiled, his skeletal face illuminated by the glow of the stand arrow. He spoke the words that Izuku had been waiting his entire life to hear, the words that would change everything. You too can be a hero. He stepped forward. Izuku, trembling, held out his hand. He wasn't sure if he was supposed to take the arrow or not, but it didn't matter. With a swift, precise motion, Toshinori brought the tip of the ancient artifact down and pricked the soft flesh of Izuku's finger. There was no pain. Only a sudden, blinding flash of emerald light, and the feeling of 1,000,000 volts of pure, heroic energy pouring into his very soul. The world was a sea of emerald green. Izuku Midoriya floated in a silent, luminous void. There was no up or down, no sense of time, only the soft, omnipresent glow that pulsed with the rhythm of a distant, impossibly powerful heartbeat. He felt weightless, bodiless, a single point of consciousness adrift in an ocean of raw energy. "It is a burden," the voice was a whisper, ancient and weary, echoing from the very fabric of the green light. It was not a sound he heard with his ears, but a thought that blossomed fully formed in his mind. "But it is a hope." This voice was different. Younger, sterner, laced with a fierce determination. "To save even one person." A third voice, feminine and gentle, yet underpinned by a strength like tempered steel. "To stand against the shadow. To be a pillar. To smile through the pain." More voices joined the chorus, a symphony of souls speaking at once, their words and emotions washing over him. He felt their resolve, their sorrow, their sacrifice, their unwavering, incandescent will to protect. It was overwhelming, a torrent of history and power that threatened to dissolve his own sense of self. He was a single drop of rain falling into a vast ocean, and he was losing his form. He fought against it. He remembered his name. Izuku Midoriya. He remembered his dream. "I want to be a hero." He remembered the face of his idol, gaunt and bleeding, yet filled with a faith that had reignited his world. "You, too, can be a hero." The emerald sea roiled around his nascent defiance. And then, he saw them. Silhouettes, 7 of them, standing within the light. They were faint, like heat haze on a summer road, their features indistinct, but their presence was undeniable. They were the source of the voices, the previous wielders of this power. They turned to look at him, their forms shimmering, their collective gaze a heavy weight of expectation. One of them, the one standing foremost, began to solidify. It was a man of immense stature, a giant with a kind, sad smile. He felt familiar. He raised a hand, not in threat, but in greeting, a gesture of welcome, of passing the torch. And then, Izuku's world exploded back into reality. He shot upright in his bed, gasping, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. His sheets were soaked in a cold sweat. His room was dark, the only light the faint, pale glow of the moon filtering through his window. The all-star posters on his wall seemed to watch him, their smiles static and unknowing. A dream, he thought, his breathing ragged. It was just a dream, but it hadn't felt like a dream. It had felt more real than reality itself. He could still feel the phantom echo of those voices, the weight of their legacy settling into his bones. He looked down at his hand, at the finger Toshinori had pricked with the stand arrow. There was no mark, not even a speck of dried blood. It was as if it never happened. A flicker of doubt, cold and sharp, pierced through him. Had he imagined it all? Was it a hallucination brought on by stress and oxygen deprivation? Had All-Star simply pitied him and told him a kind lie to get him to go home? No. The arrow was real. He had felt it. He had seen it, and he was not alone in the room. Across from his bed, near the closed door, the air shimmered. It was like the dream, a distortion in space, a patch of reality that refused to stay still. It coalesced, gathering the faint moonlight, weaving it into a shape. A form. A humanoid figure floated there, its feet not touching the ground. It was tall and lean, built like a fighter, but it had no face, only a smooth, featureless plane. Its body was a translucent, shimmering emerald green, the same color as the void in his dream. It was unstable, its edges glitching and dissolving into pixels of light before reforming, like a faulty hologram struggling to maintain its projection. It crackled with a faint, static-like energy, a sound like leaves skittering across pavement. Izuku stared, his breath caught in his throat. His mind, the same mind that had obsessively catalogued hundreds of stands, supplied the answer with a certainty that was both terrifying and exhilarating. A stand. My stand? He slowly, shakily, raised his own hand. The shimmering green figure mimicked the motion perfectly, its own arm rising in silent synchronicity. Awe, pure and undiluted, washed away his fear. It was real. It was his. He, Izuku Midoriya, the boy without a stand, had a stand. A wave of dizzying euphoria washed over him. He wanted to scream, to laugh, to run through the streets shouting his joy to the world. He scrambled for his phone, his fingers clumsy and trembling. He had to tell him. He had to tell All-Star. He found the contact, a number Toshinori had given him on a small, discreet card before they parted. He dialed, his thumb hovering over the call button. He hesitated. It was 3 a.m. He couldn't possibly. He hit the button. The phone rang twice before a familiar, tired voice answered, laced with a grunt of sleepy confusion. HNNGH. Yagi speaking. IT's here. Izuku screeched into the phone, his voice cracking with emotion. All-Star, sir! Mr. Yagi! It's here! It worked! It's in my room right now! It's green and it shimmers and it doesn't have a face, and it's kind of glitchy but it's real. I have a stand. There was a pause on the other end, followed by a series of wet, hacking coughs. My boy, slow down. Breathe. You're saying it manifested? Yes. Yes. I woke up and it was just there. Floating. It's beautiful, Izuku whispered, his eyes welling with tears as he stared at the ethereal figure. Heroes. Good. Toshinori's voice was calmer now, awake and alert. The mentor was taking over. That's the first step. Listen to me very carefully, Midoriya. Do not try to use it. Do not try to command it. Your body is not ready. It is an egg holding the sun. Try to crack it open now, and it will incinerate you. Do you understand? Yes, sir, Izuku said, his excitement tempered by the gravity in Toshinori's tone. Good. Meet me at sunrise. Dagoba Municipal Beach Park. We have a lot of work to do. The line went dead. Izuku sat there in the dark, the phone still pressed to his ear, his gaze fixed on the silent, flickering guardian across the room. Sunrise. His new life, his real life, would begin at sunrise. He didn't sleep for the rest of the night. He just watched, mesmerized, as his dream floated silently in the dark. Dagoba Municipal Beach Park was less a park and more a monument to human negligence. For years, illegal dumping and the currents of the ocean had conspired to turn this once beautiful stretch of coastline into a garbage dump. Mountains of rusted metal, broken appliances, discarded furniture, and tangled heaps of plastic waste covered every inch of the sand. The air hung thick with the smell of salt, rust, and decay. It was a place the world had forgotten. It was the perfect place to build a hero from scratch. Izuku arrived just as the first sliver of the sun peeked over the horizon, casting a golden-orange glow on the peaks of the trash mountains. He saw Toshinori standing there, already waiting. In his frail, skeletal form, he looked like another piece of driftwood washed ashore. He was leaning against a dilapidated, rust-eaten refrigerator. Morning, young Midoriya, Toshinori greeted, his voice a low rasp in the quiet morning air. Glad you could make it. Of course, sir, Izuku said, bowing deeply. I wouldn't miss it for the world. He was vibrating with a nervous energy, his eyes darting around at the sea of garbage. So, what's the plan? Secret martial arts training? Spiritual meditation to communicate with my stand? He started muttering, his analytical mind kicking into overdrive. Given the legacy nature of the stand, perhaps a historical study of the previous users is required to unlock its potential? Or maybe it's about emotional resonance, so I need to put myself in situations that evoke strong heroic impulses to stabilize the manifestation. Whoa there, kid! Put the brakes on the muttering, Toshinori said, holding up a hand. He patted the refrigerator beside him. First, I want you to try and move this. Izuku blinked. The refrigerator? That's the one. Confused, but eager to please, Izuku walked over to the fridge. He planted his feet in the sand, gripped the grimy sides, and pulled. Nothing. He grunted, straining with all his might. The fridge didn't budge. It was half buried in the sand, its weight immense. After a solid minute of fruitless effort, he collapsed, panting. It's no good, sir, he gasped. I can't even make it wobble. Tashinori nodded grimly. I expected as much. You saw my stand yesterday. You saw what it can do. That power, that is what is currently residing inside of you, but your body is a completely unsuitable vessel for it. You're a teacup trying to hold the entire ocean. If you tried to throw a real punch with heroes right now, your arms would fly off, your legs would explode. You'd be reduced to a pile of bloody confetti. The image was so graphic, so horrifying, that Izuku turned pale. The UE entrance exam is in 10 months. Tashinori continued, his tone becoming sharp and businesslike. That's our deadline. In that time, you need to transform your body from a fragile teacup into a sturdy, reinforced chalice, capable of at least holding a single drop of that ocean without shattering. He gestured to the entire beach, a sweeping motion that encompassed the mountains of trash. You're going to clean this entire beach. Izuku stared at him, then at the seemingly endless landscape of refuse. It was an impossible task. It would take a whole team of professional sanitation workers months, maybe years. All of it? He squeaked. All of it. Tashinori confirmed. This isn't just about building muscle, my boy. This is about spirit. This is a heroic task in itself. You will be serving the community. You will be taking a forgotten, broken place and making it beautiful again. This physical labor will forge your body, and the act of service will temper your soul. It's the ultimate workout. He pulled out a thick stack of papers stapled together. On the front page, in bold, cheerful lettering, were the words, Aim to Pass. American Dream Plan. I've designed a complete training regimen for you, Tashinori said, handing the packet to Izuku. It details every hour of your life for the next 10 months, diet plans, sleep schedules, different phases of strength training, from lifting to dragging to sorting. It will be grueling. It will be hell. But if you follow it to the letter, by the time the exam rolls around, this beach will be pristine, and your body will be ready. Izuku flipped through the pages. They were filled with complex charts, detailed meal plans, heavy on protein, low on junk, and exercise routines that looked like they were designed for an Olympic athlete. It was daunting. It was terrifying. It was the most wonderful thing he had ever seen. So, Tashinori said, a glint in his tired eyes. Do you accept? Izuku looked from the impossible plan to the impossible beach, and then to the man who believed in him. A fire ignited in his chest, burning away all doubt and fear. Yes, sir, he said, his voice ringing with a conviction he'd never felt before. I accept. The first 3 months were pure, unadulterated agony. Every day, Izuku would wake up before dawn, follow the strict diet plan his mother tearfully helped him prepare, and head to the beach. He would work for hours, his body screaming in protest, before heading to school, where he'd struggle to stay awake in class. After school, it was back to the beach until sundown, then home for more food, homework, and a collapse into a dead sleep, only to wake up and do it all again. His life became a cycle of pain. His muscles ached with a deep, persistent fire. His hands, soft and used to holding nothing heavier than a pen, were soon a mass of blisters, which then turned to calluses, which then split open and bled. He learned the sharp, metallic smell of rust and the dull, cloying scent of mildew like they were his own personal colognes. He started small, dragging tires out of the sand, hauling bags of plastic bottles. Tashinori was always there, perched atop a pile of junk like a skeletal gargoyle, shouting encouragement and advice. You're gripping too high, my boy. Use your legs, not your back. The largest muscle groups are your foundation. Breathe. Control your breathing. A hero who can't manage his stamina is a hero who gets defeated. More. You think this is hard? Try stopping a runaway bus with your bare hands while a villain with a laser beam stand is trying to turn your face into a puddle. Sometimes, Tashinori would transform into his all-star form for a few precious seconds to demonstrate a technique, effortlessly lifting a rusted-out car to show proper form, before deflating with a pained cough. There were moments of despair. Weeks would go by where it felt like Izuku had made no progress at all. He would spend an entire morning trying to dislodge a single, half-buried washing machine, only to fail, collapsing in the sand, his body trembling with exhaustion, his spirit flagging. In those moments, he would look at the vast expanse of trash still remaining and feel a crushing wave of hopelessness. I can't do this, he would think, tears of frustration stinging his eyes. It's too much. I'm not strong enough. But then, he would remember. He would remember Bakugo's terrified face. He would remember Tashinori's belief in him. He would touch his finger, where the arrow had pierced his skin, and feel the phantom tingle of the power sleeping within him. And he would get up. He would wipe the sweat and grime from his face, grab onto the washing machine again, and pull. His stand, Heroes, was a constant, silent companion. It would flicker into existence at moments of extreme exertion, a shimmering green echo of his struggle. It would overlay his arm as he strained to lift a heavy object, its form still unstable and glitchy, offering no tangible strength, but serving as a constant reminder of the prize. It was the light at the end of this long, dark tunnel of physical torment. Around the 6-month mark, something shifted. The pain was still there, but it was a familiar companion now, not an enemy. His body had started to change. The scrawny, frail frame was being replaced by lean, wiry muscle. He could now move objects that had been impossible for him before. He dragged refrigerators across the sand, he coiled massive, rusty chains, he built neat, towering piles of sorted refuse. Other people started to notice. Joggers who used to avoid the blighted beach would now run along the steadily growing stretch of clean sand, sometimes shouting words of encouragement. The transformation of the beach, and of the boy working on it, was becoming a small, local legend. One evening, as he was hauling a massive truck tire, he saw a familiar figure jogging on the clean part of the beach, music blasting from his headphones. It was Bakugo. He had clearly been training for the UA exam as well. His physique was more powerful, more defined than before. He didn't seem to notice Izuku, covered head to toe in filth, but Izuku saw him. He saw the confidence, the power, the arrogance. He saw his rival. And it wasn't discouraging. It was fuel. The fire in his gut burned hotter. I'm coming, Kaken, he thought, giving the tire a mighty heave. I'm not the same Deku anymore. I'll stand in the same ring as you. The final month was a frantic blur. With the end in sight, Izuku pushed himself harder than ever. He worked with a feverish intensity, his body a well-oiled machine now, honed by 9 months of relentless toil. He moved with a purpose and strength he never could have imagined possessing. Finally, on the morning of the UA entrance exam, it was done. Izuku stood on the seawall, his hands on his hips, breathing in the clean, salty air. The sun was rising, casting its golden rays upon a completely pristine, beautiful beach. Every last scrap of garbage was gone, piled neatly in designated zones for the city sanitation department to collect. The sand was clean, the water was clear. He had done it. He heard a car door shut and turned to see Tashinori walking towards him, phone in hand. My boy, look at this, Tashinori said, his voice thick with emotion. He showed Izuku a picture on his phone. It was a photo of Izuku from 10 months ago, a scrawny, crying mess of a kid, standing in front of a mountain of trash. Then, Tashinori lowered the phone and looked at the real thing. Izuku, shirtless, his body now lean and covered in a latticework of hard-earned muscle, stood proudly atop a neatly stacked pile of metal, screaming in triumph at the rising sun. He had taken the photo just moments before. Excellent work, Tashinori said, his skeletal face breaking into a wide, proud grin. He looked less like a dying man and more like a proud father. You did it. You reclaimed this shore. You transformed your body. You are ready. Izuku felt a wave of emotion so powerful it almost buckled his knees. He looked at his hands, no longer soft, but calloused and strong. He looked at the beach, a testament to his 10 months of hell. He had done the impossible. Now, Tashinori said, his tone shifting. For your reward. And your final test. He pointed to a single object sitting alone on the sand. It was a refrigerator, almost identical to the one he had failed to move on that first day. You have prepared the vessel, Tashinori said, his voice dropping to a low, serious register. It is time to pour in the first drop. Izuku walked down to the sand, his heart pounding. This was it. The moment everything had been leading up to. He stood before the refrigerator, taking a deep, steadying breath. He could feel the power within him, no longer a terrifying, alien presence, but a slumbering giant, waiting for his call. Focus, Tashinori instructed from the sea-wall. Remember what I told you. A stand is a manifestation of your spirit. Your fighting will. You don't ask it to appear. You command it. Izuku closed his eyes. He reached deep inside himself, past the pain and the exhaustion, to the core of his being. He found the fire that had driven him for the past 10 months. The desire to save, to protect, to be a hero. He clenched his fist, and he pulled. The air around him crackled. The slumbering giant awoke. Heroes manifested behind him. It was different now. It was no longer a glitchy, translucent phantom. It was solid. Dense. It looked like it was carved from a single, flawless piece of emerald. Its form was still sleek and faceless, but it radiated an aura of immense, controlled power. Green, lightning-like energy arced across its body. Good, Tashinori breathed. Izuku opened his eyes. He could feel the connection, a perfect synchronicity between his will and the stand's existence. He cocked his right arm back, and the stand mirrored him, its own arm glowing with a ferocious intensity. He could feel the power welling up inside him, a sensation like a dam about to burst. Remember, from the gut! Tashinori yelled. Clench your butt cheeks, and yell it from the very core of your soul! Izuku let out a primal roar, a sound torn from the depths of his spirit, a culmination of a lifetime of yearning and 10 months of hellish labor. It was a declaration of his own existence. Smash! He threw the punch. His fist stopped an inch from the refrigerator's surface, but the stand's fist passed through his own, a ghostly green overlay, and connected with the metal. The result was not a dent. It was not a crumpled door. The result was annihilation. The instant the emerald fist made contact, a cataclysmic shockwave erupted. The refrigerator didn't just break, it exploded into 1,000 tiny pieces, as if it had been hit by an anti-tank round. The force of the blow carved a trench in the sand behind where the fridge had stood and sent a plume of water shooting up from the ocean 50 yards away. The sound was a deafening crack boom that echoed across the bay. Izuku stood there, his arm extended, his mind reeling from the sheer, unbelievable devastation he had just unleashed. A wide, incredulous grin spread across his face. He had done it. He had power, real, overwhelming power, and then, the price came due. A wave of agony, white-hot and absolute, shot up his arm. He looked down and watched in horror as his right arm, the one he had punched with, turned a sickening, mottled purple. He heard a series of wet, cracking sounds like a bundle of dry twigs being snapped all at once. His bones were breaking, shattering under the strain of the power he had just unleashed. He screamed, collapsing to his knees, clutching the ruined limb. The pain was beyond anything he had ever experienced, a deep, grinding misery that made his 10 months of training feel like a pleasant daydream. His stand flickered and vanished. Tashinori was by his side in an instant, his face a mixture of immense pride and grave concern. I should have warned you that would be more powerful than I anticipated. It seems your passionate spirit amplified the output. My arm! Izuku gasped, tears of pain streaming down his face. It's broken, yes, Tashinori said, carefully examining the limb. Shattered, more like. We need to get you to a hospital. But first, you need to understand what just happened. He helped Izuku to his feet, supporting his weight. The primary ability of heroes is a simple one, passed down from its very first user. Its name is Stockpile. Izuku listened, trying to focus through the blinding pain. It is a stand that absorbs and stores kinetic energy. Tashinori explained, his voice urgent. Every step you take, every punch you throw, every movement you make, the stand passively absorbs a fraction of that kinetic energy and stores it within itself, like a battery. It can also absorb kinetic energy from the world around it. The power you just unleashed wasn't just your power, it was the stored energy of 10 months of relentless, backbreaking labor, all released in a single, focused instant. It clicked in Izuku's analytical mind. The training hadn't just been to strengthen his body. It had been to charge the weapon. Then, why did my arm break? Izuku choked out. Because you, my boy, are still just the switch, Tashinori said, his expression grim. Your body is now a vessel strong enough to contain the power without dying. But it is not yet strong enough to channel it. Think of it like a percentage. You unleashed 100% of the stored energy through a body that can maybe handle 1%, maybe 2% of that output without breaking. The backlash, the recoil from that immense release of power, was focused entirely on the limb you used to channel it. Your bones couldn't handle it. He looked Izuku square in the eye. This is the challenge you now face. You have inherited the mightiest of swords, but you do not know how to wield it. Every time you use it at full power, it will break you. Your journey from this point on is not about gaining power, but about learning control. You must learn how to regulate the output. To perform a 5% smash, a 10% smash. To use just enough power for the situation, without destroying yourself in the process. That is the true test of a hero. Izuku looked at his shattered arm, then at the devastation on the beach. He had the power. He was going to UA High. But his fight had only just begun. The path ahead was paved with broken bones and unimaginable pain, and as Toshinori helped him limp towards the road to find a doctor, Izuku Midoriya, for the first time, smiled through the agony. It was a start. The main gate of UA High was less an entrance, and more a statement of power. It loomed over Izuku Midoriya, a colossal U and a forged from gleaming, futuristic alloy, a gateway to a world he had only ever seen in his dreams. The school itself was a bizarre architectural marvel, a cluster of gleaming glass towers that seemed to scrape the heavens, connected by sky bridges and surrounded by a campus so vast it was practically its own city district. This was the fortress, the hallowed ground where legends were made, and he, somehow, was walking through its gates. His right arm was in a sling, a stark white counterpoint to the dark green of his new school uniform. The doctors at the hospital had been baffled. The bones in his arm weren't just broken, they were practically powderized. They had set them as best they could, muttering about bizarre stand-related accidents, and told him he'd be in a cast for weeks. But the moment Toshinori had wheeled him out of the emergency room, he had introduced him to a short, elderly woman with a tight bun and a syringe-like stand named Quiet Riot. Her name was Recovery Girl, UA's resident nurse and a wielder of one of the most powerful healing stands in the country. One kiss from her stand, a bizarre process that involved her stand planting a loud, wet smooch on his forehead, had used his own stamina to hyper-accelerate his body's natural healing process. The bones had knit back together in minutes, leaving only a deep, phantom ache and a stern warning from the old woman about youngsters who can't handle their own power. Toshinori had insisted on the sling for a day, to sell the injury and avoid suspicion. Now, walking the hallowed halls, Izuku felt a profound sense of imposter syndrome. Every student he passed radiated an aura of confidence he couldn't even begin to fake. He could feel their stands, faint shimmers of spiritual energy that clung to them like expensive perfume. One boy had a tail swishing behind him, a permanent manifestation of his transformation-type stand. A girl with pink skin and small horns on her head laughed with her friends, her stand probably linked to her unique physiology. They were natural-born geniuses, the elite, winners of the cosmic lottery since birth. And he was just Deku, the boy who'd snuck in the back door with a borrowed power he couldn't even control. He was so lost in his anxious thoughts that he didn't see the person in front of him stop. He walked right into her, stumbling forward. Oof! Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry! A girl's voice chirped. He looked up and into a pair of large, warm brown eyes. The girl had a round, friendly face and a short brown bob. She was looking at him with genuine concern. Are you okay? That was a clumsy stop on my part, and no, it was my fault. I wasn't looking where I was going. I'm so sorry. Izuku stammered, his face flushing a brilliant red. He was talking to a girl. A girl was talking to him. His brain promptly shut down all non-essential functions. Well, no harm done, she said with a bright, easy smile. My name's Achiko Uraraka. It's nice to meet you, Izuku Midoriya. He managed to squeak out. That's a neat sling, she commented, her head tilting. Training accident? Yeah? Something like that. Before he could embarrass himself further, she said, We'd better get to the orientation, or we'll be late. She waved cheerfully and disappeared into the massive auditorium. Izuku stood there for a moment, his heart doing a frantic drum solo. I talked to a girl. And then a more terrifying thought followed. And we're in the same class. He hurried into the auditorium, his face still burning. The orientation was a blur of speeches and introductions from pro-hero teachers. The loudest, of course, was President Mike, a hero whose stand, Voice of America, allowed him to amplify his voice to deafening, destructive levels. Izuku dutifully took notes, his old habits dying hard. Finally, they were directed to their homeroom, Class 1A. The door was ridiculously oversized, a clear message that UE was prepared for students of all shapes, sizes, and stand-related body modifications. He took a deep breath and slid the door open, and immediately saw him. Katsuki Bakugo. He was already there, feet kicked up on a desk, scowling at a tall, serious-looking boy with glasses who was reprimanding him for disrespecting school property. Bakugo hadn't spoken to Izuku since the sludge villain incident, and Izuku was more than happy to keep it that way. He tried to slip past unnoticed, but Bakugo's crimson eyes snapped at him, narrowing with contempt. "You," Bakugo growled, his voice low and dangerous. Before the confrontation could escalate, the friendly girl from before, Uraraka, appeared at Izuku's side. "Hey, Midoriya! I knew we were in the same class. This is so exciting." The tall boy with glasses turned his attention to Izuku. "Good morning. I am Tenya Ida, from Semi-Private Academy. I must apologize for my behavior during the entrance exam. You grasped the true nature of the test, the hidden rescue point system, while I did not. You are clearly the superior student," he declared, chopping the air with his hand. Izuku just blinked, completely overwhelmed. Rescue points? He hadn't even known about those. He'd just been trying not to shatter every bone in his body while disabling the robots. The day progressed at a dizzying pace. Their homeroom teacher was a tired-looking man in a sleeping bag, who revealed himself to be the pro-hero eraser head. His real name was Shota Aizawa, and his stand, Hungry Eyes, was infamous in the underworld. By maintaining direct line of sight, he could temporarily nullify another person's stand. It was a terrifying power for villains, and a perfect tool for a teacher trying to control a room full of superpowered teenagers. Aizawa put them through a grueling stand apprehension test, forcing them to use their abilities in a series of physical trials. It was here that Izuku truly began to grasp the sheer power level of his classmates. There was Shoto Todoroki, son of the number 2 hero, Endeavor. His stand was a unique, dual manifestation type called Hot and Cold. The right side of its body could generate intense cold and ice, while the left could produce scorching flames. He was a powerhouse, effortlessly dominating every test. There was Tenya Ida, whose stand, Born to Run, manifested as engine-like structures on his calves, granting him incredible speed. And there was Ochako Uraraka. Her stand was a graceful, slender figure with featureless pink pads on its fingertips called Walking on the Moon. By having her stand touch an object, she could completely nullify its gravitational pull, making it weightless. She scored infinity on the ball throw test by simply making the ball float away into the upper atmosphere. Izuku struggled. He couldn't use his smash without breaking himself, so he had to rely on his wits and the raw physical strength he'd gained during his training. He did poorly on most tests. When it came to the ball throw, he knew he had to do something. Aizawa had threatened to expel whoever came in last place. Control, he thought, remembering Tashinori's words. Not 100%. Not even 5%. Just a little bit. A single drop. He focused, channeling the power of heroes, not into his whole arm, but into the very tip of his index finger. He threw the ball, and at the last possible second, he flicked his finger, releasing a tiny, controlled smash. Whoosh! The ball shot off like a cannonball, leaving a sonic boom in its wake. The recoil was still immense. His finger instantly turned purple and broke with a sickening crack, but the rest of his arm was fine. He had managed to contain the backlash. Aizawa's lips curled into a feral grin. Not bad, he grunted. You're not just a one-trick pony, then. You have potential. Izuku had passed. He hadn't come in last. And he had taken the first, agonizing step toward controlling his incredible new power. Far away, in a darkened room that felt more like a mausoleum than a command center, a man sat on a throne-like chair, his face hidden in shadow. Wires and tubes snaked from his body, connecting him to a complex life support system. This was Hisashi Shigaraki, the man the world knew only as All for One. A monitor before him flickered to life, showing a grainy, distorted image of Yuehai, captured by a long-range surveillance stand. "The signal is confirmed, Master," a voice rasped from a speaker. It was Kurojairi, a loyal servant whose warp gate stand was invaluable. "A spiritual energy signature, identical to all stars, has been detected emanating from a first-year student." All for One was silent for a long moment. He had felt it. The day All-Star had fought that sludge villain, he had felt the last embers of his rival's power flare up and then extinguish, like a dying star finally collapsing. But then, a new light had been kindled. Faint, unstable, but undeniably the same signature. The same hated power. Heroes. That ridiculously sentimental stand, passed down through generations of bleeding heart fools who thought self-sacrifice was a viable strategy. A thorn in his side for over a century. He had thought he had finally snuffed it out when he broke All-Star's body. He had been wrong. The fool had found a successor. "A child," Shigaraki mused, his voice a dry, sibilant whisper. He believed in order. He believed that power, stands, should be controlled, curated, and distributed by a single, benevolent hand. His hand? This passing of power from master to student was a chaotic, unpredictable variable. It was an affront to his philosophy. It had to be snuffed out before it could grow strong. "The plan to attack the unforeseen simulation joint is nearly ready," Kurojairi reported. "Tamura is eager." "Tamura is a child throwing a tantrum," Shigaraki countered, a hint of disdain in his voice. "He is not ready for a direct confrontation. We need more information. We need to know the limits of this new vessel." He steepled his fingers, his own stand, the terrifying master of puppets, shimmering into existence behind him. It was a nightmarish being, its body a tangled mess of wires and marionette strings that seemed to fade into nothingness. Each string represented a stand he had stolen, a power he had catalogued and made his own. "Send a scout," Shigaraki commanded. "Someone subtle. Someone who can test the boy without revealing our hand. I want to see what this new legacy can do." He smiled, a chilling, bloodless expression. "Let's see if All-Star's taste in airs has improved over the years." A single, ethereal string detached from Master of Puppets, glowed with a sickly purple light, and slithered away into the darkness. A mission had been assigned. The next day, Class 1A was scheduled for their first session in a state-of-the-art training facility known as the Foundational Heroics Combat Center. The exercise was simple, a 2-on-2 battle, one team acting as heroes and the other as villains. The villains were tasked with guarding a fake nuclear weapon hidden somewhere within a multi-story building. The heroes had to either capture the weapon or apprehend both villains within a time limit. The teams were chosen by lot. To Izuku's horror, he was paired with Ochiko Uraraka. And their opponents? The team of Tenya Ida and Katsuki Bakugo. "So I'm up against Kaken," Izuku muttered, his blood running cold. This wasn't just a training exercise anymore. This was personal. "Don't worry, Midoriya," Uraraka said, giving him a determined smile. "We have a plan, right? What's your stand's ability, anyway? You were so mysterious about it yesterday." Izuku hesitated. He couldn't exactly say. "It's the most powerful stand in the world, but if I use it, my body explodes. It's a strength enhancement type," he said, which wasn't entirely a lie. "But it has a really severe drawback. I can't use it carelessly." Uraraka nodded, her expression serious. "Okay. So we'll rely on our wits. And my stand. Let's do our best." As they waited for the match to begin, All-Star, Toshinori in a discreet earpiece, gave him some last-minute advice. "Young Midoriya, you know young Bakugo better than anyone. His pride is his greatest strength, and his greatest weakness. He will not treat this as a team exercise. He will come for you, and you alone. Use that." The siren blared, signaling the start of the match. Izuku and Uraraka slipped into the building, their hearts pounding. The interior was a maze of concrete corridors and empty rooms, a perfect urban battlefield. "Okay, Uraraka," Izuku whispered, his analytical mind kicking in. Ida will stay to guard the weapon. He's too logical to abandon his post. That means Kaken is on the hunt. He's coming for me. You need to find the weapon while I keep him busy. Keep him busy? Midoriya, his stand. I know, Izuku said, his face grim. I've been on the receiving end of it more times than I can count. I have a plan. He didn't have to wait long. They rounded a corner, and Bakugo was there, blasting down the hallway toward them with a feral grin, his palms crackling. TNT was already out, a snarling, explosive phantom hovering at his shoulder. Deku! He roared. I've been waiting for this. He didn't aim a punch. He swung his right arm in a wide arc. A little opening move! An explosion ripped through the wall to Izuku's right. Bakugo hadn't touched it. Izuku's eyes widened in realization. He must have prepped the building. He touched spots on the walls on his way up, turning the whole structure into his personal minefield. Go, Uraraka! Now! Izuku yelled. Uraraka, trusting him, turned and sprinted down a different hallway. Bakugo ignored her completely. His focus was entirely on Izuku. You're not getting away, you damn nerd! He lunged, his stand's fist glowing orange. Izuku dodged, the punch grazing his shoulder. The fabric of his uniform instantly lit up with the telltale glow of TNT's power. Bakugo could detonate his clothes at any moment. This was the nature of their bizarre training encounter. It wasn't a stand battle in the traditional sense yet. It was a high-stakes game of tag, with Izuku desperately trying to avoid Bakugo's touch while analyzing the situation. But as Izuku fled through the labyrinthine corridors, a strange feeling began to prickle at the back of his neck. A sense of being watched. Not by the cameras broadcasting the match to their classmates. This was different. Colder. He chalked it up to nerves, to the pressure of fighting Bakugo. He was wrong. Unseen by anyone, perched on the roof of an adjacent building, a figure watched the battle through a pair of high-powered binoculars. He was a lanky man with a bored expression, dressed in a nondescript gray jumpsuit. His stand was a small, insect-like creature that sat on his shoulder, its multifaceted eyes glowing faintly. This was the scout All for One had sent. His villain name was Silence, and his stand was a subtle but terrifying weapon. Inside the building, Uraraka had found the bomb room on the 5th floor. Ida was there, playing the part of a villain with melodramatic glee. Mwahaha! So you've found my lair, hero! But you shall never touch my beautiful weapon! Uraraka knew she couldn't take him in a direct fight. His stand made him too fast. So she came up with a plan. She touched the floor with her stand, walking on the moon, then stomped her foot. The entire section of floor tiling became weightless, flying up into the air and creating a massive cloud of debris and dust. A smoke screen? Ida scoffed. A classic, but foolish maneuver. But it wasn't a smoke screen. It was a distraction. While Ida was busy navigating the floating debris, Uraraka made her real move. Downstairs, the battle between Izuku and Bakugo had reached a fever pitch. Izuku was using his wits, his knowledge of Bakugo's fighting style, and the capture tape all students were issued to try and outmaneuver him. He managed to trick Bakugo into punching a pillar, allowing Izuku to wrap the tape around his leg. But Bakugo was relentless, his explosions tearing the building apart. Why won't you use it, Deku? Bakugo roared, his frustration mounting. That flashy power you used in the entrance exam. Are you looking down on me? Do you think you can beat me without it? That's exactly what I think, Kaken. Izuku shouted back, a bluff born of desperation. It was the wrong thing to say. Bakugo's face contorted with pure rage. He raised his gauntlet, which had been slowly filling with his nitroglycerin-like sweat. I've been storing this up. If you won't use your full power, then I'll just have to force it out of you. He was aiming to kill. It was at that moment that the scout, Silence, decided to act. He had seen enough of the boy's evasiveness. It was time to apply some pressure. His small, insected stand, Sound of Silence, buzzed its wings. From its perch on the distant rooftop, it targeted the corridor where Izuku and Bakugo were fighting. Suddenly, the world went dead. The roar of Bakugo's explosions, the crackle of his power, the frantic pounding of Izuku's own heart in his ears, it all vanished. An invisible sphere of perfect, absolute vacuum had descended upon the hallway. There was no air to carry sound waves. The effect was instantaneous and deeply unsettling. Izuku felt a wave of vertigo wash over him. His sense of balance, so intrinsically linked to his hearing, was gone. He stumbled, his mind reeling from the sudden sensory deprivation. Bakugo was also affected, his confident stride faltering as he looked around in confusion. What is this? Izuku thought, his panic rising. A new part of Kaken's ability? No, this doesn't feel like him. This is something else. Another stand, the scout on the roof smiled. The first phase of his stand's ability was disorientation. The second was more direct. With no sound, communication was impossible. Teamwork, strategy, it all fell apart in the face of absolute silence. He wanted to see how the boy would react when completely isolated. Bakugo, ever the creature of instinct, recovered first. He saw Izuku's disorientation and seized the opportunity. He lunged, his gauntlet aimed not at Izuku, but at the floor beside him, intending to use the concussive force to send him flying. But Uraraka's plan upstairs had just come to fruition. Using her gravity-nullifying power, she had made herself weightless, and used the pillar as a makeshift baseball bat, swinging a massive piece of floating debris at Ida. The home run comet, as she called it, sent Ida stumbling and gave her the opening she needed. She floated over him and touched the fake nuclear weapon. The hero team wins! All-Star's voice boomed through the speakers in the observation room, but not in the hallway where Izuku was trapped in the sphere of silence. Bakugo didn't hear it. He pulled the pin on his gauntlet. A massive, building-shaking explosion erupted. Izuku, still disoriented, was thrown back by the blast, slamming hard against the far wall. The pain was immense, but it was the silence that was more terrifying. He couldn't hear the explosion he had just seen. He couldn't hear the building groaning around them. He couldn't hear his own ragged breathing. This is a villain attack, he realized with chilling certainty. Someone is interfering with our training exercise. He pushed himself up, his body aching. He had to end this. He had to stop Bakugo and figure out what was going on. He looked at his rival, who was panting, equally confused by the silent world they now inhabited. Izuku knew he had one shot. He focused, channeling the power of heroes into his right arm. Not 100%. A controlled smash. Just enough. He braced his left arm against his right, a desperate attempt to support the limb and mitigate the damage. He ran forward, directly at Bakugo. Bakugo, seeing him coming, prepared for a final, decisive clash. Izuku threw his punch, aiming not at Bakugo, but at the ceiling above him. Smash! He roared, though no sound escaped his lips. The punch connected. The ceiling disintegrated. The shockwave tore upwards, ripping through floor after floor of the building. It was a controlled, vertical blast, designed not to harm Bakugo, but to change the battlefield entirely. The force of the punch, combined with the structural damage from Bakugo's earlier explosions, was too much. The entire building groaned, its structural integrity failing. Debris rained down around them. The sudden, violent change to the environment seemed to disrupt the enemy stand. The sphere of silence shattered. Sound rushed back in, the roar of collapsing concrete, the blare of alarms, Bakugo's own shocked yell. Izuku's arm was a wreck. Even with the support, the 5% smash had been too much. It was fractured in a dozen places, the pain excruciating. But he had done it. He had fought Bakugo to a standstill and broken the influence of the unknown enemy. The scout on the roof lowered his binoculars, a thoughtful frown on his face. The boy had broken through the silence with pure, overwhelming power, and he had done it in a way that protected his opponent while defeating him. Interesting. He had the data he needed. His stand dematerialized, and he slipped away into the city's shadows, his mission complete. Back in the ruined building, Izuku collapsed, his consciousness fading from the pain. The last thing he saw was Bakugo staring at him, his face a mixture of fury, shock, and a sliver of something that looked unnervingly like respect. And beyond him, he saw the worried face of Uraraka and the towering, heroic silhouette of All-Star, rushing to his side. He had won, but he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to his broken bones, that a new, far more dangerous battle had just begun.